Welcome to NTD Good Morning.
Here are today's top stories. President Trump announcing the first stage of a massive $500 billion trade deal with Japan. Meanwhile, he's weighing decisions on Taiwan arms sales and pushing diplomatic efforts with Iran and with Ukraine.
Rescuers are searching for 9 missing skiers after an avalanche near Lake Tahoe in California.
A Georgia man arrested for allegedly charging at the U.S. Capitol with a loaded rifle. What police are saying about the incident.
Mark Zuckerberg set to testify in a major social media trial in LA. Parents who say social media harm their children are expected to pack the courthouse.
Texas, meanwhile, suing Wi-Fi router maker TP-Link, alleging the company hid its ties to China and exposed U.S. users to serious cybersecurity risks.
U.S. figure skater Alysa just a few points behind Japan. She's in 3rd place. That sets her up nicely to become the first U.S. women's Olympic figure skater to reach the podium since 2006.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Today's Wednesday, February 18th. You're watching NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, the search is on for a group of skiers after an avalanche near Lake Tahoe in Northern California.
Authorities say 6 survivors have been rescued, but 9 remain missing.
The Nevada County Sheriff's Office says 2 skiers have been transported to a hospital for treatment. A captain with the Sheriff's Office said 46 rescuers were traveling to the site to look for the missing skiers.
Now, according to a forecaster with the Sierra Avalanche Center, the group was on the final day of a 3-day trip. That's when the avalanche hit. The Sheriff's Office described weather conditions in the area as highly dangerous.
And 4 people were killed yesterday following a massive crash involving more than 30 vehicles, including 6 semi-trailers on Interstate 25 near Pueblo, Colorado.
Now, this was after strong winds created a brownout that drastically lowering visibility for drivers. 29 people were taken to the hospital with injuries ranging from minor all the way to severe.
A spokesperson said the cause of the crash is still being investigated, with the lack of visibility being one of the factors being considered.
Strong winds that hit eastern Colorado yesterday were also blamed for fanning the wildfires, causing delays at Denver's airport. And news coming out of Washington, D.C. just now. Police say they arrested a man yesterday who allegedly ran towards the Capitol building with a loaded gun.
This afternoon, we had a white Mercedes SUV park in the 100 block of Maryland Avenue. And then we had a person exit that vehicle with a shotgun and begin running towards the Capitol. I think it's also important to note that this individual had a tactical vest on. The shotgun was loaded. He had additional rounds on his person.
Police identified the suspect as 18-year-old Carter Camacho of Georgia.
They say he complied with the orders to drop his gun, and then he was taken into custody. Police say a helmet and gas mask were also found inside his vehicle, which they say was not registered in his name.
He was arrested on charges of unlawful activities and carrying a rifle without a license, among other charges.
A motive for the would-be attack has not yet been determined. Lawmakers are currently on recess and not in the Capitol building.
Now, authorities say they are running down thousands of leads in the search for Nancy Guthrie. That's the mother of NBC anchor Savannah Guthrie, who went missing.
That's right, but the DNA from a pair of gloves that were found 2 miles from Guthrie's home hasn't thrown up any matches on the FBI's database.
The Pima County Sheriff's Department said in a statement the DNA from the gloves did not match DNA found on the property either. That DNA is also being analyzed. The Sheriff's Office did not say where in the home it was found.
Meanwhile, investigators are trying to locate Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker. They're working with the manufacturer and other experts in the field.
They're also looking into the backpack worn by the suspect, one they say was sold exclusively at Walmart. The Pima County Sheriff said yesterday they're working with Walmart managers across the state to try and find out how many of those backpacks they sold in the last couple of months.
President Trump is weighing in on the case. He's telling the New York Post he wants the Justice Department to seek the death penalty if Guthrie is found dead. And now an update on the Rhode Island hockey shooting. Police say the person who opened fire Monday during a youth hockey game at an ice rink was specifically targeting family members. The alleged suspect, who identified as transgender, killed his ex-wife and his son. Authorities say the shooting happened inside the Dennis M. Lynch Arena in Pawtucket. He was seen wearing women's clothes at the time. The victims were identified as Rhonda Dorgan and her adult son, Aiden Dorgan. 3 others, including Rhonda Dorgan's parents and a family friend, remain in critical condition. The suspect is 56-year-old Robert Dorgan, who also went by the names Roberta Esposito and Roberta Dorgano. Police say the shooter, a man who identifies as a woman, died from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound after bystanders rushed to intervene. Court records showed gender identity issues were initially cited in the couple's 2020 divorce filing. Authorities say the investigation remains ongoing as the community continues to mourn. And joining us now to discuss what families, educators, and communities can do to prioritize emotional support after such a tragic loss of life is Aaron Boxer. Aaron's a former special education teacher and the CEO of Diversified Education Services. Aaron, thanks for joining us on this somewhat somber note. When a community is affected by such a deep tragedy, how should parents and educators help them through these dark times? Obviously, the children, but this is something the whole community is experiencing.
Yeah, it's great to be here, unfortunately, under these circumstances. And my heart goes out to the family and the families who are affected in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The first thing parents need to do is they need to regulate themselves. Kids read our nervous systems before they hear our words. They can really read us. So it's important to stay calm. And it's difficult, especially if you're directly impacted by this horrific shooting. And think about what they tell you on a plane. If you lose cabin pressure, what happens? The masks come down. But what do they tell you to do? Put it on yourself first. And it's the same situation here. First, you have to take care of yourself, and then you take care of the kids. It's the same concept here.
Now, Aaron, beyond parents, teachers, and clergy, what other grief resources exist when a community goes through such an intense experience like this?
Yeah, we have to really look at the resources. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of practice when it comes to these horrific tragedies and these shootings in schools or around schools. And I would directly go to what sort resources the individual school has. There are teams that they put together that if something happens, they get deployed, and they're usually mental health professionals, psychologists, and social workers. But outside of the direct institution where the shooting might have happened or the tragedy happened, then we have community resources and clergymen, the churches and synagogues. They all have people that are trained to help when there's a tragedy such as this. One thing to note is there will never not be an option. You don't have to just sit with it. Whether it's your child or whether it's the adult, there's always places that people can go. Even social services at their local town hall will have something. Nobody should have to sit there in silence because they couldn't find the resources.
Yeah, that's very, very sound advice. And Aaron, I want to kind of pan back a little bit. You know, obviously when this hits a community, it's devastating. But there's this sort of, as you mentioned, this is becoming more and more common, unfortunately. How should parents and educators respond to children of different ages, not knowing if they heard the news or not? Obviously, if this is, you know, the next town or two over, the kids in the adjacent communities are going to have heard of it. But, you know, kids are not necessarily always looking at the news. How should parents sort of diagnose if these resources are needed for their kids?
It's a really good question. And that's the thing is, I think it's a good point you're making, and I don't want to break it apart semantically, but parents don't diagnose. That's what the professionals do. And so if they see something, they need to say something. Stability heals, and schools have to acknowledge the event briefly and clearly and not ignore it, and then try and return to some type of structure. Inevitably, they're going to have to go back to it. And this has to do with parents and with schools, is we have to keep things predictable. One of the things that happens in the day after a tragedy such as this is they'll get together as a community. And I think that's really important. But I also encourage the predictability of the schedules returning. Keep things consistent. It's the calm that's going to restore a sense of control, familiarity. We want families to mirror that at home, mirror that consistency with bedtime. Be careful with media exposure. We now know that social media has such an impact to influence kids that before 16 years old, they really shouldn't be on it anyway. If you do allow your child to be on social media, at least have a conversation with them. Maybe steer them away from what their algorithm wants them to see, which are horrific scenes. There's shootings everywhere on social media. So just keep check-ins, force conversations, but do it in a non-forceful manner. When you keep the communication between school and home, it is critical. And if you see something, again, with the child who's struggling, you don't want to ignore it.
And Aaron, I don't want to put you on the spot, but how could you give an example of how a parent might actually engage or open up I think once the conversation is happening, sort of instinct takes over. But what is the appropriate way for a parent to, initiate such a conversation, to figure out, if their child saw the incident or not, or if they proactively, want to talk about these types of topics?
Yes. So I'm a special educator by trade. It's a different frame of thinking of, let's say, a general education teacher. We think differently. I'm now an executive functioning coach, and I'm working with families. And a lot of things happen. A lot of things come up, not necessarily shootings, God forbid. But how we approach kids when it comes to not doing their homework, it's not that much different than when there's a tragedy. And kids are not necessarily fragile, but they're observant. And they need adults who will model the steadiness and not the panic. And I'm sure for those who have kids out there, if you frame what a child isn't doing right at the moment, right? Let's take the homework, and you approach them and you're huffing and puffing, you know what kind of reaction you're going to get. You might still get that to a certain extent if you say it calmly, but when it comes to a shooting like this, they're going to be extremely vulnerable. And sometimes they just need a hug, right? Just to break the ice. They might need to cry it out. Sometimes it's the nonverbal cues, right? No one's going to know your kid better than you. It's take a moment to teach the coping skills, take some deep breaths with them, and just show them some love. And one of my favorite lines to say with kids who are struggling is, I hear you and I'm here for you.
I hear you and I'm here for you. So powerful. And also, the point that I take away from this is it's almost as much on the parent. And you said the modeling is really important. So such great advice. It's such a difficult time for the country and, of course, for these communities that are enduring this. Aaron Boxer, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gary.
Such a good point about social media. Of course, that's in the headlines as well, with Mark Zuckerberg in the spotlight. But parents even taking more control in terms of social media is surely important at times like this.
Absolutely. Yeah, they can quickly go down a wormhole. I've checked the logs on my screen time, and it could happen. It could happen.
Yeah. All right. Next. Now, President Trump addressing a range of major international developments.
Trump announcing the first phase of a sweeping trade deal with Japan, and he's also addressing diplomatic efforts over China, Iran, and the Russia-Ukraine war.
President Trump has announced 3 new projects with Japan, the first stage of a trade deal worth more than $500 billion. The president declaring the agreement officially underway yesterday. He says Japan is moving forward with major investments in the United States worth a total of $36 billion. Among the first projects, a natural gas power facility in Ohio. That's according to Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, who says it will be capable of generating 9.2 gigawatts of electricity. Another project is aimed at expanding crude oil exports from the Gulf of America near Texas. Lutnick estimates the facility will export between $20 and $30 billion worth of crude oil annually. The president has credited his tariffs for helping secure the agreement, saying the scale of the project is so large it could not have been done without them. Meanwhile, the president is also addressing tensions with China over Taiwan arms sales. Trump saying on Monday he talked to Chinese leader Xi Jinping and would make a decision soon on whether to halt the sale of weapons to Taiwan. Trump said he expects to visit China in April. Meanwhile, Vice President J.D. Vance, speaking to Fox News, is weighing in on diplomatic talks with Iran.
I think the president has a lot of options. We do have a very powerful military. The president's shown a willingness to use it. He also has a remarkable diplomatic team. He's shown a willingness to use that, too.
He said Trump is trying to find a solution that would make sure Iran cannot have nuclear weapons.
I think it's very important for the American people to appreciate it's one of the most hostile and also one of the most irrational regimes in the world. You can't have people like that have the most dangerous weapon known to man.
And U.S.-brokered peace talks between Ukraine and Russia continue in Geneva. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky saying Kyiv is ready to move toward what he calls a worthy agreement. He implied the ball is in Russia's court, asking, quote, just what do they want? Trump is urging Kyiv to move quickly to reach a deal to end Europe's biggest war since 1945.
U.S. Southern Command said yesterday that the U.S. military struck 3 alleged drug trafficking vessels, killing a total of 11 people. 2 of the boats were in the Eastern Pacific, killing 4 people on each boat. Another 3 were killed on a boat struck in the Caribbean. U.S. Southern Command said that no U.S. forces were harmed. It brings the death total up to at least 135 on 43 boats. The strikes have also drawn significant controversy from legal experts and Democratic lawmakers. Before the campaign began in September, the Coast Guard had the task of intercepting suspected maritime drug smugglers. And the U.S. Coast Guard also seized more than $130 million in illicit drugs as part of an operation in the Eastern Pacific region to counter cartels and criminal groups. Joining us for Insight is Brent Sadler, Senior Research Fellow for Naval Warfare at the Heritage Foundation. Great to see you again this morning, Brent. What kind of resources and cooperation does it really take to bring in a haul like that?
Well, interdictions at sea are very complex and challenging to do peacefully, which is one of the reasons why you're starting to see with the frustration the fact that it has not been effective for decades in really putting these drug cartels out of business, that you're seeing these lethal attacks. Again, another discussion, but definitely justified on numerous fronts. It requires definitely good, clear intelligence. There's decades and much understanding of these cartels and the networks, perhaps in many cases knowing the individuals by their names, but also very familiar with many of the individual boats that you're seeing get attacked or even interdicted. This is how long this has been going on, this cat and mouse game. The other is to have boarding teams. This is where it gets very dangerous. If you're going to try to board one of these craft, it's dangerous just to physically do it, let alone if you've got someone on the other vessel that's armed or doesn't want you to get on board and attacks you as you're trying to come on board safely and then to apprehend them and shut the boat down. So very challenging, very dangerous, even requires a high level of insight for those attacks as well.
And what does that take? What happens next to the vessel and to the people on board if it is apprehended?
Well, if you actually attack the vessel, again, something that we're seeing increasingly since September of last year, you don't have to worry about the drugs because it goes to the bottom of the ocean. But if you actually apprehend it, there's questions about how the handling of the narcotics, and some of this is several tons, billions of dollars that are apprehended, which was just recently in early January, $1 billion of cocaine seized in Fiji. Another almost just shy of $1 billion was seized in French Polynesia in the Pacific from these same drug cartels. What happens to all that other drugs is it should be destroyed by the law enforcement agencies of the country in which the arrests were made. But again, that a lot of that could, through corruption, other means, it's suspect of finding its way back into the marketplace. But again, best thing is to destroy it at sea.
Now, I've heard quite a bit of concern about the lives that are lost through these attacks. You mentioned it has been typically quite difficult to combat this kind of crime in less violent ways. And yet, with the intelligence being hidden from the public, we do need to just go on the trust that it really is confirmed that these are narco-terrorists, and it's worth taking somebody's life there to intercept that kind of crime that will kill many more people across the U.S. What do you think, if anything, that the government could do to help reassure people that their intelligence is indeed strong enough to go forward with their actions?
Well, one of the great strengths of American democracy is that we should always, and the citizens should always, demand transparency and accountability of government, even on this issue, which in my estimation has a lot of national security foundations for why it is the right thing to do. And I think even there's a very strong legal case to be made for it. So clearly, hearings in Congress, many of those have been closed because of sensitivity to the intelligence involved. But I think continuing the administration needs to make its case to the public and in a very public and very open manner. I think that needs to continue to be pressed for. But I certainly don't see any slowing down or halting of these operations, because the cartels are very violent. They are very dangerous. They are already here in the United States, and many of these, like Tren de Aragua, with the backing of governments, the former government, Maduro in Venezuela, was supporting them here in America, intimidating and killing law enforcement and anyone in the United States that got in the way of this illicit poisonous trade that's killed well over 100,000 Americans for several years running during the Biden administration.
And what would you say is perhaps the biggest legal question surrounding these actions and your position in terms of, you've said that there is a strong legal case for it?
Yeah, so the debates on this, one is it an act of war? And I think that is not germane to this issue. You're talking about criminal activity on the high seas. One is it, and the other part of it is these are not nation states. These are not flagged vessels, or they are questionable of having any national flag. And this goes into the other discussion about the tankers that are also being seized. But just focusing in on the drug boats, the next thing is if they're not going to stop for boarding and for flag verification, even in international law, the U.S. military is authorized to be able to use lethal force. This goes back to the conduct back in the day of going after slave trade, as well as going after pirates. It's the same legal construct, same customary precedent, but there's a lot of debate of whether in this modern era that still applies. And I think it'd be good to see this go to a court. And I think that would actually, the counter argument would probably lose.
Just in the last 30 seconds we have, Brent, anything more you think the administration could do to combat this issue?
Well, I think on a military side, I mean, we are now going aggressively after the cartels. It needs to expand as they try to find new markets. Those two interdictions in Fiji and in French Polynesia is an indication that they're trying to make up for lost market share in the United States because of the interdictions that are occurring in the Caribbean and the Eastern Pacific. So broaden the reach, deepen the attacks.
Great to hear from you this morning, Brent Sadler. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.
Really a completely different approach since Trump came in how to deal with these cartels and their effect on the U.S. with exporting drugs.
Yep, the news keeps rolling in on this front. Up ahead, President Trump giving his State of the Union address. That's next Tuesday.
We're going to speak with a political analyst to discuss what's at stake.
Meanwhile, Mark Zuckerberg set to testify in a major social media trial in Los Angeles. Parents who say social media harmed their children are expected to pack the courthouse. Welcome back. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is expected to take the stand today in a landmark social media trial in Los Angeles.
The case is one of more than 1,000 lawsuits accusing Meta and Google of designing addictive features that harm young users. NTD's Christina Corona brings us more.
Mark Zuckerberg is set to testify Wednesday in a major social media trial in Los Angeles. The lawsuit alleges that Meta and Google designed products they knew would addict children. Zuckerberg is expected to face grieving families in court, and his testimony comes after facing sharp questioning on Capitol Hill 2 years ago.
So you didn't take any action. You didn't take any action. You didn't fire anybody. You haven't compensated a single victim. Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. There's families of victims here today. Have you apologized to the victims? Would you like to apologize for what you've done to these good people?
I'm sorry for everything that you've done. No one should have to go through the things that your families have suffered.
Several parents who say social media played a role in their children's deaths are expected at the courthouse again this week. One father says his 17-year-old son died by suicide in 2022 after being coerced into sending explicit images on Instagram.
Social media is an absolute addiction for young people at many different levels. It's not just about sextortion for us in this fight anymore. There's fentanyl parents here. There's suicide videos that are getting fed to these young people that are just looking for self-help and looking for an answer. And they're getting fed suicide videos. How to?
Another mother says her 17-year-old daughter died from fentanyl poisoning after she allegedly received laced drugs from someone she met on Instagram.
I don't know how they live with themselves. They have children. They don't allow their children to be on social media. I don't know how Mark Zuckerberg can live with himself knowing that his hands are bloody.
Meta and Google deny the claims. Instagram chief Adam Mosseri also testified last week, pushing back against the idea that problematic social media use meets the clinical definition of addiction. Christina Corona, NTD News.
A California man has pleaded guilty to attacking federal immigration officers with rocks during riots in Los Angeles last year.
Now he faces up to 20 years in prison.
The incident took place during a joint immigration operation near a Home Depot in Paramount, California in June 2025.
Now, according to the plea agreement, one of the rocks shattered a vehicle window and it cut an officer's forehead.
According to ICE, the man had been on the run after the riots and was captured at the U.S.-Mexico border last July.
His sentencing hearing is now scheduled for August.
And an ICE operation turns deadly after an illegal immigrant flees.
A Guatemalan national was speeding away from a traffic stop in Georgia Monday when he crashed into another vehicle, killing a local teacher.
Oscar Vasquez Lopez was arrested following the accident. He faces first-degree homicide by vehicle, reckless driving, driving without a valid license, and other charges. The woman killed in the accident was identified as special education teacher Linda Davis.
Homeland Security says federal officers were trying to enforce a removal order before Lopez sped away. Authorities say Lopez entered the U.S. illegally at an unknown date and had no other criminal history. Lopez was also injured in the accident and he was taken to the hospital. Police say his injuries were not life-threatening.
A federal judge has blocked ICE from detaining Kilmar Abrego Garcia again. Abrego Garcia first drew national attention when he was deported to El Salvador in March 2025. He later returned to the U.S. Judge Paula Hines has now converted the temporary restraining order against his rearrest into a formal injunction. Hines ruled yesterday he cannot be deported again because the government did not have a feasible plan for removing him from the country. The Department of Homeland Security considers Garcia a violent criminal and an MS-13 gang member, charges he disputes. He also faces federal criminal charges in Tennessee for allegedly transporting illegal immigrants. Abrego Garcia denies those charges.
And Tricia Mclaughlin is stepping down as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs over at the Department of Homeland Security. In a social media post, Mclaughlin thanked President Trump, Secretary Kristi Noem, and the American people for the opportunity to serve. She expressed enthusiasm about the team's continued work, saying she looks forward to the fight ahead. Lauren Biss will now take over as Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs. She has worked with Mclaughlin since the start of the Trump administration. Katie Zachariah will serve as Deputy Assistant Secretary and spokeswoman. Secretary Noem praised Mclaughlin's dedication, professionalism, and role in advancing DHS's mission to secure the homeland, saying she will be missed, but wishing her success in her future endeavors.
And lawmakers are targeting high gas taxes in California with a new bill. Congressman Kevin Kiley announcing plans to penalize states that overtax drivers, aiming to lower prices at the pump. The bill would reduce highway funding for states where gas taxes exceed 50 cents per gallon. In California, taxes and fees push the price to nearly $1 per gallon, the highest in the country. Kiley says the legislation is meant to encourage fiscal responsibility while stopping federal dollars from subsidizing excessive taxation policies that drive up the cost of living. Last year, Governor Gavin Newsom's office said his state's fuel prices were a consequence of a legislatively mandated and voter-approved gas tax increase.
And President Trump will give his State of the Union address next Tuesday. For a preview, I spoke with Jeff Crier. He's a political analyst and the host of Ringside Politics. I asked him his expectations for the upcoming speech.
It's going to be sort of overshadowed a little bit by the government shutdown, which is going on. So, of course, there's going to be a lot of conversation about that. And then the president's going to really be setting his agenda for the year and talking about what he believes are the accomplishments to allow the Republicans to maintain the majority in the Congress. It's all about the midterms. So he'll be setting the stage, I think, for a lot of the political battles that'll be happening in the months ahead.
Yeah, indeed. He is going to be setting the agenda and the table for the midterms, which will very quickly be underway as we get into the primary season. kitchen table issues tend to be the most important to the American electorate. So what will the president try to articulate on Tuesday in that regard?
Right. That's a good point. I mean, even though we can have a lot of success internationally, I mean, people vote their pocketbook. It's always the economy that is a paramount issue. The polls show that. So he's going to be trying to talk about the big A word, and that is affordability, and showing that the economy is moving in the right direction. So we'll talk about interest rates being low. He'll talk about how he believes it's a much better economy than it was when Joe Biden left office. Gas prices are down, egg prices are down, certain grocery prices are down. And that's going to be it. I mean, people really will make their decision, I think, this November based on how they feel economically. And the polls show that the Republicans are in trouble on that issue right now.
Yeah, and to that point, the president will typically try to bring in special guests, and that's a long-going tradition now with State of the Unions. That list, to my knowledge, has not yet been released, but those guests tend to sort of illustrate, going back to kitchen table issues, that there are real people that are affected by these policies, and then they, have them stand up. They give them usually a standing ovation. So, are there any things that you're expecting in that regard, even if you don't know who the people are? What issues that might reinforce?
Well, I mean, he normally brings on people that have maybe done heroic things, military service members, law enforcement officers, people that have, served the country admirably. He could also bring on folks that have benefited from his policies, farmers, business owners who are, moving in the right direction, growing their business. He could bring on, Americans who have sadly been damaged by illegal immigration, angel moms and dads who have, lost loved ones due to illegal immigration across the nation. So that's one of always the president's top priorities, doing something about the number of illegal immigrants in the country. That's what the ICE crackdowns are about. But the worry from some pollsters is that too much focus on that takes away from the issue that really the American people want to hear about, and that is the economy. So I think the majority of the speech, the majority of the guests will be in some way dealing with his economic policies and the benefits. We just heard the report about how the tariffs are helping with, trade with Japan and all these new projects. So I think that's going to be woven into even the guests.
And I saw this stat last week showing that over the last 10 or 20 years, the U.S. has actually net lost jobs across most industries, but that the healthcare industry has boomed so much that it's become this sort of outsized element in our society. The things that they're trying to accomplish with MAHA and the reducing of drug prices, those things don't take effect immediately. But how important, outside of course, the economy being the number one thing, can you speak a little bit to the role of healthcare and MAHA and how the Republicans have a different strategy, certainly when it comes to these subsidies, and that's something where people know that they need to reduce the cost of healthcare, but how to do it really seems to be something that has not yet come to fruition.
Right. Well, let me just agree with you. I think MAHA was the reason President Trump won. I mean, I think having RFK Jr. on his team, I think that was the key endorsement that he received that helped push him over the top. So, what RFK Jr. has been doing has been so important, and he's sort of given him free rein. So they've had new policies concerning vaccines, new policies concerning nutrition. All of that, I think, is going to be mentioned in the president's speech. You have Trump RX. He's trying to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, which have been a real problem, move the manufacturing of prescription drugs to our country, which is a national security issue to have China, manufacturing our prescription drugs. And then what RFK Jr. is trying to do is to get people healthier so they don't need to be on so many prescription drugs, which I think is something that's got bipartisan support. So, yeah, I do believe that's going to be a big part of it. And let me go back to the economic issue again. I think he's going to also talk about the One Big Beautiful Bill and how, these tax cuts are going to be implemented throughout the year. And that's going to be a benefit. So he might bring on some guests that are maybe folks that are getting relief from their tax on tips or their tax on Social Security, or the different measures in the bill that have been beneficial to Americans.
Yes, and in this sport of politics, you always try to take credit for the good things and blame your competitors for the things that go wrong, and both parties do it. I'd like to get you to look from the perspective of the other side now. What points will the Democratic senator and former CIA analyst Alysa Slotkin try to make in her rebuttal of the State of the Union, and speak to where Slotkin fits into what appears to be somewhat a fractured Democratic Party at this point? Sort of, I wouldn't call it an identity crisis, but new stars are rising, and you definitely have two very different factions or philosophies within the Democratic Party.
Well, now remember, she was part of that video that talked about people not having to follow quote unquote illegal orders. And that was a very controversial video that 6 Democrats participated in. And of course, there's been a lot of pushback from the Trump administration about that. But she was featured in there. I think she's considered a star in the Democratic Party. So it's a big slot for her to take, and maybe sets her up as a potential VP candidate or something going forward. I haven't heard her name as a, presidential candidate, but maybe VP. That's a key state that she represents. And right, she maybe has got to thread the needle between the more moderate Democrats and the far left wing. The energy is really being pushed by the far left wing of the Democrat Party. And I don't think the Democrats are going to be successful in 2028 if the party is just represented by socialism. So you've got to be able to bring a coalition together, talk about more moderate issues as well. And she might be the perfect person to do that for the Democrats, since she's got an image of not being as far left as some of the others like AOC that get more of the limelight. So this is a chance for her to get some attention, and we'll see where it takes her in the Democrat Party.
Well, there'll definitely be some significant ringside politics on display on Tuesday. We're very much looking forward to it and always appreciate your analysis. Jeff Creer, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to see Jeff there. And folks, don't miss President Trump's first State of the Union address of his second term next Tuesday, as you heard.
That's right. The president expected to cover the most pressing issues of our day, from the economy to achieving peace abroad. He's going to reveal his yearly plan to Congress as well, the nation as well as the world.
Make sure you watch NTD for that coverage. We've got Tiffany Meyer, Steve Lance, and Mari Otsu, all lovely favorites of ours. It'll be 7 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday. They're going to be tracking the president ahead of his speech, hearing reactions from lawmakers, and speaking with panels on what it all means for you. So don't miss it. Up ahead, meanwhile, Hollywood is not happy with the new AI videos generated using a new tool from ByteDance. The film industry accusing the platform of violating actors' rights and character copyrights. And Texas is suing Wi-Fi router maker TP-Link. They're alleging the company hid their ties to China and exposed U.S. users to serious cybersecurity risks. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. If you're just joining us now, here's some of today's top headlines. President Trump announcing projects with Japan. They're worth $36 billion as part of a historic trade deal. He's also weighing Taiwan arms sales with China and seeking solutions to keep Iran from getting nuclear weapons. And U.S. brokered talks continue in Geneva, with Trump urging Ukraine to act fast on a peace deal. Police have arrested an 18-year-old from Georgia after he allegedly ran toward the Capitol carrying a loaded shotgun and wearing a tactical vest. They say they found a helmet and a gas mask in his vehicle. Officials have not yet determined a motive for the attempted attack. Lawmakers, fortunately, were not in the building at the time. They're on recess. And Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg expected to take the stand today in a landmark social media trial in LA. The case is one of more than 1,000 lawsuits accusing Meta and Google of designing addictive features that harm young users. Several parents who say social media played a role in their child's death are expected at the courthouse again this week. Meta and Google denying the claims. Instagram chief Adam Mosseri also testified last week.
He pushed back against the idea that problematic social media use meets the clinical definition of addiction. And China under scrutiny in the Lone Star State, Texas suing TP-Link Systems. Now, that's a California-based maker of Wi-Fi routers. It accuses the company of concealing its ties to Beijing. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the case, which Texas says has potentially exposed American users to hackers.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton announced the lawsuit yesterday. He alleges deceptive marketing practices. Paxton first began investigating Wi-Fi router maker TP-Link in October 2025. Governor Greg Abbott has since prohibited state employees from using TP-Link products. TP-Link was founded in China in 1996. The company says it restructured in 2024, splitting into TP-Link Systems and TP-Link Technologies, which serves mainland China, and claims the two are no longer affiliated. Devices sold in the U.S. are labeled Made in Vietnam. But Paxton alleges those labels obscure a supply chain deeply entrenched in China, with nearly all components sourced there before final assembly in Vietnam. The lawsuit argues those ties leave the company vulnerable to Chinese Communist Party counter-espionage and national security laws, which require Chinese companies and citizens to assist state intelligence efforts, including providing foreign user data upon request. The complaint also says firmware vulnerabilities in TP-Link hardware have already exposed millions of consumers to serious cybersecurity risks. Paxton says the devices function as an open window for Chinese-sponsored threat actors, not the secure doorway consumers expect. The suit seeks up to $10,000 for each violation of Texas's Deceptive Trade Practices Act, or up to $250,000 per violation if the affected consumer is 65 or older. The case follows a House Select Committee on the CCP hearing last year, where retired NSA cybersecurity expert Rob Joyce linked TP-Link devices to the Salt Typhoon hacking campaign, targeting U.S. telecom companies including Verizon and AT&T. Joyce urged lawmakers to eliminate TP-Link's footprint in the United States. TP-Link says it is headquartered in Irvine, California, operates as an independent American company, and that no government, including Beijing, has ownership or control over its products or user data. TP-Link held more than 36% of the U.S. consumer router market in 2024, meaning a ban could rival the 2019 Huawei crackdown as one of the largest removals of Chinese telecom equipment from the U.S. market. Paxton has described the lawsuit as part of a coordinated series of actions against CCP-aligned companies. In December, his office filed privacy lawsuits against Hisense and TCL, accusing them of selling television viewers' data without consent. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And up ahead, U.S. figure skater Alysa Liu just a few points behind Japan in third place, giving her a chance to become the first U.S. Olympic figure skater to get to the podium since 2006.
Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Two Japanese figure skaters led the women's short program yesterday at the 2026 Winter Olympics. It was quite impressive.
Absolutely. They outscored American skater Alysa Liu and the rest of the U.S. team, dubbed the Blade Angels.
Ami Nakai landed a triple axel and earned a career best of 78.71 points. Kaori Sakamoto, who's a three-time world champion and a 2022 Olympic bronze medalist, scored closely behind with 77.23 points.
Now, Alysa Liu was third at 76.59 points, and that puts her just 2.12 points behind the leader, opening up a chance for her to win the first U.S. Olympic medal in women's figure skating going back 20 years now. The U.S. has not won a gold for this event, going all the way back to Sarah Hughes in 2002.
The women's figure skating medals will be decided during the free skate final tomorrow. The U.S. is still trailing with 6 gold medals behind Norway's 12 and Italy's 9. And I must say, they're learning about the axle that we just spoke about. It's very impressive. It actually usually happens at 20 to 25 miles per hour.
Wow, amazing athletes they are.
Into it. Okay, next, there are many perks to aging. Experience, wisdom, a lifetime of memories. But it can also bring challenges, of course, including sagging skin and wrinkles. Dun, 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 dun.
That's right. Enter Daniel Monahan. He spoke with a nutritionist about natural ways to slow down father time, maintain a youthful appearance.
Let's hear it, Daniel.
Best-selling author and nutritionist Nick Zanetti has worked with elite musicians and athletes, helping them optimize their diets for physical and mental well-being. One key theme in his work, staying youthful naturally through nutrition. Zanetti explains the skin has 3 layers, the outer epidermis, the middle connective layer called the dermis, and the deepest fatty layer, the hypodermis. He says the dermis is especially important when it comes to maintaining youthful skin.
It is where we have 2 proteins extremely important, collagen and elastin, which are the ones that they start to essentially they start to lose their strength once we cross 45 and even more after 50. And it's a little bit more like a house which starts to collapse. And that's when you start to see the signs of aging, like the wrinkles and so on and forth.
Zanetti says nutrition can make a significant difference. He focuses on 3 key nutrients to improve skin appearance and vitality. The first is zinc.
So I want to start with zinc, which is the least talked about. But zinc is basically compulsory for skin production, and it's also compulsory for the cells to replicate themselves. So it is the one nutrient that very few people consider when they think about what they can do internally for skincare.
He says the best sources include oysters and other seafood. Beef is another strong option. For vegetarians and vegans, pumpkin seeds, chickpeas, and lentils are good alternatives.
So all of these 5 foods, they can give the right amount of zinc, so the body has, let's say, the nutrients to start to repair the skin. Obviously, without expecting miracles, because I don't know how to make miracles.
The second key nutrient is vitamin C.
Now, for collagen to be with the correct structure, we do need vitamin C. So vitamin C helps the collagen reach the correct structure. And therefore, if we are below a minimum of 80 milligrams of vitamin C per day, and it can be even more if someone really needs to do a strong protocol, the collagen production is not going to work in a really, really good way.
Top sources include red bell peppers, broccoli, kiwi, oranges, and tangerines. The third nutrient is collagen itself.
Collagen is found mostly in very few foods. The main ones are fish with skin and bone broth.
The SMASH guideline highlights some of the healthiest fish choices: salmon, mackerel, anchovy, sardines, and herring.
The portion is the size of a palm 2 to 3 times a week. And if possible, if we keep the skin on, like mackerel, for example, or in the sardine, it's very easy, and you don't taste the skin.
Bone broth is another option.
When it comes to bone broth, which is a really I really like that kind of food because it helps with several things, including helping our gut. But I would say probably the size of a cup, a couple of times a week.
You can buy bone broth pre-made.
Or you can make your own. On the internet, there are many recipes on how to do super nice bone broth.
Zanetti says collagen is the most abundant protein in the human body.
So our tendons, parts of our joints, parts of the skin, there is this important part made of collagen. And everything we discussed today can have a positive impact, again, without expecting miracles, also at the level of the joints.
You can find Zanetti on social media at Nick Zanetti Official, where he gives talks on nutrition almost every night. Here's to staying young naturally. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Great report there by Daniel with Dr. Zanetti there. Also, you could follow the advice of Mike Tyson. He says, eat real food, which seems to have the same spirit of Daniel's report there.
Simple does it.
Well, look, if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see us cover, as you can see, we're very open to all types of things.
Yeah.
Nutrition, politics, whatever you got. Send us a tip at goodmorning@ntd.com.
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live. Download our NTD app. I'm Stephanie Cox.
I'm Carrie Dunst. Have a great day.